Hi, Dolores. Hi, Steve. Hi, Kay. Hi, Greg. How you doing? Hi, Dale. Hey, Steve. Glad to see you. Nice to see you, Kay. Steve says Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then boom. Yeah, then boom is right. I think there's going to be a big boom. Also, Dolores is here, if I haven't already said that. Okay, and Evelina is here too. Hi, Dolores. Hey, Evelina. Hi. Jason Bessie has joined. Hi, Jason. Nice to see you. Hope everything's well with you. I think I forgot to link to a bunch of things. I'll fix that up in an edit, okay, later. But for now, I'm just going to put the links in the comments. So you'll have those in the comments. Okay. Yeah, Nomiki Konst. She is. She's very much an insider and has a lot of good insights. Okay, she's also progressive, friends with Crystal Ball. She was on the ground in 2016 when Bernie was cheated out of many votes in the primary in Brooklyn. Yep, no, Mickey is pretty cool. And Ed Lagana likes my post in the certified campaign, the certified letters campaign, which I started along with Lana Dell, actually. Yeah, Lana is not here tonight, at least for a while, because she's in a Medicare for All meeting. She tells me. Okay, the first thing I wanted to go over tonight, I see my chin is below the horizon again. I'm going to try to change that. I wanted to call your attention to this piece of news. Not there yet. Can't call your attention to it yet. Here it is. Appeared in Common Dreams, Jake Johnson, staff writer, and that was today, Wednesday, January 29th. Quote, absurd, unquote. Sanders campaign hits back at Associated Press story equating Bernie's Social Security record with Joe Biden's. And you can imagine they hit that really hard, the Sanders campaign said. Uh, Email to Common Dreams senior advisor Warren senior advisor Warren Gunnels said the Associated Press's framing or any effort to paint the two presidential candidates on the issue as similar is absurd. Of course, you all know that. Okay, Warren said Vermont Senator is a career-long advocate of expanding Social Security, which today provides essential income for tens of millions of Americans. And Warren said that Joe Biden has done exactly the opposite. He has a 40-year record of actually proposing cuts to Social Security, cost of living adjustments, raising the retirement age, and means testing benefits. Said to suggest otherwise is to completely rewrite history. That's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. The whole thing is ridiculous. We've gone over the record in previous streams we've had, and the record is very, very clear. Okay, the Associated Press cited a quote from Bernie in Burlington Free Press in 1996. Bernie said, as our population ages, it is clear we'll have to make incremental adjustments in Social Security taxes, okay, and benefits as Congress, has done in the past. Uh, so Biden has also used the same term, okay, adjustments, which in Biden's case was a euphemism for cuts. But in Bernie's case, it wasn't a euphemism for cuts. It was a euphemism for raising the Social Security tax cap and increasing Social Security. Increasing Social Security payments, that's what Bernie meant. Completely the opposite of what Joe Biden meant. And this, of course, is right. As Tyson Brody, research director for Bernie Sanders, wrote in a series of tweets late on Tuesday, in 1997, we must adjust the FICA Act cap so millionaires and billionaires pay more into Social Security. And you see their tweets there. And Guttles also pointed to Bernie's sponsorship of H.R. 4084, H.R. 1422, H.R. 2035, and Senate Bill 731, and numerous other pieces of legislation to make clear the senator's decades-long commitment to expanding Social Security, even at a time when both Republicans and Democrats in Congress were advocating for cuts. And YM. Oh, there I go. So, wonderful. They don't appear to be showing here at all. I don't know why. Okay, folks, am I still here? I had a bit of an interruption. Can everybody see me? Please let me know. I just had a glitch. The Canadian guy, David Doel, Rational National. Yep, he gives great commentary. Am I still on? Can you still see me, everybody? It says I'm live here, so I'm going to go on as if I am live. Hey, Bonnie, am I still live? Yes. Okay, thanks. Okay, so that covers that particular quick item. It's a ridiculous charge. It's just a lie. It's confirmed by the director of Social Security Works, Alex Lawson, and by Gunnels, and by the research director for Sanders. And the article lays that out very, very clearly. I completely agree with their facts. Okay, Bonnie says everything is all right, so I'm going ahead. So, okay, another attempt, but by the mainstream media to lie to people, just to lie to people. They have their own version of the facts. And Ryan Grimm tweeted just recently that Biden simply blatantly lied about Social Security at Iowa's Black and Brown Forum this week. Question: do you think it's fair enough, okay, for voters to question your commitment to Social Security when in the past you proposed a freeze to it? Biden said, no, I didn't propose a freeze. And the questioner said, yes, you did. Yes, he did. Of course he did. We have the receipts. We have the tape. It's there. Everybody accepts it. Lies by Biden are not going to do anything except to screw with his credibility, which is already damaged enough, in case he doesn't know. So getting into the Green New Deal part of the news, another article that appeared in Common Dreams on January 29, 2020. As Bernie continues to make new news while his campaign, is going on. He condemned the NAFTA 2.0 deal, which Trump has just signed, as a giveaway to the fossil fuel industry, and he vowed to immediately renegotiate the Trump deal if he is elected. That is very big news. He's now on record as saying he's going to renegotiate the deal immediately. So he's putting Mexico and Canada on notice, as well as Trump, on notice. Not only is he going to condemn Trump for this deal, he's going to make short work of the deal if he wins the presidency. And that's the U.S. MCA deal, of course, the United States, Mexico, Canada trade agreement, the USMCA, which Trump just signed after it was passed by bipartisan action in both houses of the Congress. It's not a treaty. The agreement is what's technically known as a congressional executive agreement. It has the force of law because it was passed by both houses, but treaties actually require 2/3 approval in the Senate. They're harder to get through. So generally in trade agreements, we don't try to go with treaties because they're too hard to pass. So we've taken to doing these congressional executive agreements. Only problem with them is that a new congressional executive agreement, or just a repeal of the old one, that can be done by the United States. And new Congress does not bind our government to stay in a congressional executive agreement. If a future Congress should pass a new agreement, or just a new law abrogating the old agreement, and the president agrees, then that agreement is gone. So what Bernie can simply do is get the Congress to repeal the agreement as soon as he gets in, and then for him to sign the law, and we're out of that agreement. We are not bound in the same way we would be by a treaty, because they can't get treaties through, so they don't pass the treaties. So this is the consequence. We can get out of these agreements if we want to, whatever the agreements themselves say. So Bernie said, as the only leading presidential candidate to oppose Trump's NAFTA 2.0, I am pledging today that upon being sworn in as president, I will immediately begin to renegotiate this disastrous deal to combat climate change, stop the outsourcing of American jobs, and end the destructive race to the bottom. So Bernie is going to renegotiate this because it's It's a disaster for the environment. It's a disaster for climate change. The trade agreement does not once actually mention climate change, nor does it mention any other similar term like the climate emergency term, which is certainly close to the truth actually right now. As Bernie says, this deal does nothing to prevent fossil fuel companies like Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron from dumping their waste and also pollution into Mexico and destroying the environment. It preserves the disastrous investor state dispute settlement system for oil and gas companies, which, by the way, it does. It gets rid of ISDS in every other area, but not for the fossil fuel companies, not for ExxonMobil, not for Chevron. It allows those companies to continue to put corporate profits ahead of our air, water, climate, and health. Unquote from Bernie. Quote again, we need a trade policy that works for the working class and improves the environment. That's exactly what I will fight for as president. And there are tweets from Bernie to further justify what he said. He's entirely right and also completely right on this. While the USMCA is a marginal improvement on the NAFTA deal, it doesn't touch the really vital areas of trade that we have to have now because of the climate situation. So that's it. As soon as he gets into office, he's going to repeal this terrible deal that Trump just completed. And there's a quote here from the UAW. Okay, even though the deal was supported by the AFL-CIO, the UAW is standing apart. And they're pointing out that it's not going to bring back the hundreds of thousands of good manufacturing jobs that have already been shipped to Mexico. And the UAW also said, quote, even under the rosiest of scenarios, it would only stem the tide. We need to invest in workers and fix our bad tax and labor laws to compete on a level field abroad and restore the good manufacturing jobs that built our middle class, unquote. And Bernie will certainly try to do that. And the first step in trying to do that is getting rid of the U.S. MCA. And as I said earlier, Bernie has vowed to do that. And you know, when Bernie vows, if he possibly can, you can take that to the bank. If he can possibly do it, and as president, sooner or later, he's going to be able to do this. And Joe Biden not only lied about Social Security, but Joe Biden also falsely claimed that not a single solitary scientist thinks that Sanders' Green New Deal can work. And guess what? There's an open letter, and this is in an article in Common Dreams by John Kelly or Keeley. I really have to find out how he pronounces his name since I say it so many times. Anyway, in an article on January 29, 2020, he reports that after Vice President Joe Biden late last week falsely claimed there's not a single solitary scientist that thinks the kind of bold Green New Deal initiative put forth by his 2020 rival Bernie Sanders can work, more than 4 dozen, in fact nearly 5 dozen, U.S. climate scientists responded Tuesday, in just a few days, to make clear this just isn't true. And you can see the names of the scientists. There's a PDF link here. And if you click on that link, you can see the names of the scientists who signed the letter that they sent. And then there are tweets, "I'm a scientist and I think it can work," and so on. And Sanders told the crowd in Iowa, "Well, Joe, you're wrong." Yes, of course. When is he ever right? Okay, maybe like a broken clock, he's right twice a day. And maybe not even then. But anyway, proof of support for Bernie came Tuesday in the form of a succinct yet forceful letter addressed to Sanders by 57 climate researchers and scholars. And the letter said, "The top scientific body on climate change, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, tell us we must act immediately to bring the world together to stop the catastrophic impacts of climate change." And quoting from the letter, "The Green New Deal you are proposing is not only possible, but it must be done if we want to save the planet for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. Not only does your Green New Deal follow the IPCC's timeline for action, but the solutions you're proposing to solve our climate crisis are realistic, necessary, and backed by science. We have to project. I'm sorry. We have to protect the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the planet we call home." And Jeffrey Supran, a research associate in the Department of the History of Science at Harvard University, said that while the scholarship, quote unquote, is clear and the technology to solve the climate crisis is available, quote, what we lack most is political will, unquote. According to Supran, quote, Mr. Biden's comment embodies that. Not just Mr. Biden's comment embodies that. Mr. Biden's climate plan, which doesn't even propose to spend more than $3 trillion over 10 years, or only $300 billion a year on the climate problem, embodies that. In fact, I may be exaggerating there. It might be 1.5 T. I think I was thinking of Warren's plan, which is at roughly 3.2 trillion, I think. And Bernie Sanders' plan, of course, calls for $16.2 trillion in expenditure over 10 years, which is more like it, but it's not going to be enough either. We're probably looking more like, I don't know. This is just off the top of my head. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if we end up spending 32 trillion over 10 years. That's okay. We got Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. We are a monetary sovereign. We can easily spend because we can easily produce the required 3.2 trillion annually to do whatever we have to do to meet the climate emergency. The article says, okay, the letter is far from the only endorsement of the Sanders plan. As soon as the Green New Deal plan was released in August of 2019, it was heralded by green groups and climate experts as a game changer, as a roadmap of what we as a society need to do to confront the climate emergency, and the only proposal put forward by a major candidate that represents a level of ambition that matches the scale of the unprecedented crisis. According to Dharma Noor, writing for Earther over the weekend, and you can often see her on the Real News. She has lots, okay, of YouTubes coming out of the Real News. She's an excellent correspondent and does a great job. But she writes also, and writing for Earther over the weekend, Dharma Noor said, you could argue about some of the details of Sanders' climate plan, but you can't argue about the seriousness of the crisis it will have to take on. The climate crisis is already causing heat waves, wildfires, storms, and floods, like Australia, California. Unless we take serious action, it's going to get far, far worse. On that, the science is clear, and the Sanders plan is absolutely in line with what's needed to address it. Quote again, to have any chance of getting to net zero by 2030, we certainly need a plan that looks a lot more like Sanders than Biden's. Dr. Peter Kalmus, Associate Project Scientist at the UCLA Joint Institute for Regional Earth System Science and Engineering, said, quote, I don't know if we can get to net zero emissions by 2030. No one knows. But I do know that it's up to us. And if we don't try, we certainly will fail. And Greenpeace has put out a climate scorecard, which assesses the proposals of all the 2020 candidates. And guess what? Bernie is the only presidential hopeful who garners an A-plus grade, putting him at the top of the chart. Biden, meanwhile, ranks in fifth place behind Tom Steyer, Senator Warren, and Mayor Buttigieg with a B+. And there's a correction there. An earlier version of the article incorrectly stated Biden was in Iowa when he made his remarks on Friday. But he was not. He was in New Hampshire, which is pretty good because if he was in that state, they surely know that, as usual, he was lying. So that probably cost him a few points in New Hampshire. Bernie replied when he was in Iowa. So moving on. The Sunrise Movement is going to be hosting nationwide house parties to boost Bernie Sanders and demand the Green New Deal. I believe green there is a misprint. But here we go. Again, this is the announcement. The Sunrise Movement is asking supporters to host launch parties on Wednesday. Oh, that's today. For the 2020 effort to pass the Green New Deal and back the presidential candidacy of Senator Bernie Sanders, who's made addressing the climate crisis a major issue in his campaign. And the launch is aimed at raising energy around the, quote, our plan to win, unquote, strategy the group is employing to help Sanders win, to win, but to win the nomination of the Democratic Party and then the White House. And so there it is, very strong support for Sanders and a statement, quote, we need millions of young people along with allies of all ages to join climate strikes, organize their communities, and then turn out in force in November to decide this election. In a video announcing the loss, a member of Sunrise there's a member of Sunrise, who addresses the camera and tells the viewers that the fate of the country and maybe the world is in their hands. And the Sunrise member says in the video, whether we can pull it off is up to you and me. And it points out all potential hosts needs to have a screen, which means a laptop, a TV, okay, and a projector, okay, or a projector, a couch, a handful of people from your dorm, class, your workplace, or your neighborhood. And the group is going to provide two epic small documentaries, okay, mini documentaries, taking us through what's at stake, why we need a Green New Deal, and our plan to win. Through 2020, the Sunrise Movement is going to activate its 300 chapters in support of Bernie Sanders, leveraging 10,000 volunteers in most of the 50 states for door knocks, for voting pledges, and climate education. Launch parties are scheduled all day Wednesday, January 29th, which is today, of course. So, I thought that was a development worth noting, okay, and mentioning. Those 10,000 volunteers are going to be a big help to Bernie and a big help to getting the Green New Deal actually passed. But regular establishment Democrats are not sitting idly by. They are drafting bills in Congress to deal with climate change. And one of these bills being drafted in a House committee is referred to in this article by Jessica Corbett of Common Dreams that was published on January 28th. Quote, Green New Dud, not a Green New Deal, unquote. Climate groups denounce a draft bill from House Democrats. And there's a picture of the campfire moving through California on November 9, 2018, in Magnolia, California, if that is how you pronounce it. The campfire ripped through the town of Paradise and charred 70,000 acres and destroyed quite a few homes and businesses in a matter of hours. It absolutely devastated the town. On Tuesday, Democrats on the House Energy and Commerce Committee released the legislative text of a draft bill for a national climate plan. An environmental advocacy group issued mixed responses after they released the text of the plan, with critics charging the proposal isn't ambitious enough to address the planetary crisis. The draft climate, the leadership and environmental action for our nation, that is clean, CLEAN, cute, right? But Future Act, largely seen as a completing plan to the Green New Deal, was announced earlier this month by the committee's chair, the Representative Frank J. Pallone, who's a Democrat from New Jersey. Crafted after 15 committee hearings, the bill, there's a PDF there. Okay, there's a link to a PDF. I haven't had time to read the bill yet myself. I will take the time to read it though. Aims to ensure that the United States achieves net zero green gas pollution by 2050. We know from the IPCC report and other sources that unfortunately 2050 is going to be much too late. We have to do it by 2030. In a joint statement with Representatives Paul Tonko, Democrat of New York, and Bobby Rush, who's a Democrat of Illinois, uh, by Frank, by Pallone, I suppose that's the way he pronounces his name, said on Tuesday that, quote, everyday communities across the country are paying the price for inaction through record wildfires, flooding, and drought. And Congress cannot afford to simply watch from the sidelines. But he plans to simply watch from the sidelines from now until 2050. Because the Clean Act is going to leave us with huge, probably insoluble problems by 2050. He says the Clean Future Act treats this climate crisis like the emergency that it is. Not so, not so. While also setting the foundation for strengthening our economy and creating good paying jobs for a clean and climate resilient future. We look forward to continuing to work with all impacted stakeholders on this proposal in the coming months. Well, I sincerely hope that those who devised this Clean Future Act are immediately replaced in Congress so we don't have to work with any of them in the coming months. Replace them with people who take the target of 2030 seriously. Food and Water Action Policy Director Mitch Jones was quick to provide critical feedback with a statement of his own on Tuesday. At a moment, quote, at a moment when we need bold, decisive action from Democrats in Congress in order to stand the chance of averting climate catastrophe, Representative Pallone and the House Energy and Commerce Committee have come up far short. Simply put, this legislation is a Green New Dud, not a Green New Deal. A cheap shot, but nevertheless, I hope quite effective. Dealing some of the ways in which the Clean Future Act falls short of adequately addressing the crisis, Jones added. This proposed clean electricity goal represents a wholly inadequate approach that would allow for the continued long-term use of an array of dirty energy sources, including fracked gas with unproven, undeveloped carbon capture methods. A technology-neutral approach leaves us primed for decades more greenhouse gas emissions. He said further that a bold climate plan must call for a ban on fracking and all new fossil fuel infrastructure and a swift and just transition to 100% clean, renewable energy across all sectors of the economy. We have no time to rely on market-based schemes, dubious offset programs, or unproven carbon capture technologies designed to prolong the life of the fossil fuel industry. And that, of course, is absolutely right. We, who are my age, may have some time, but my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren yet unborn have no time to rely on market-based schemes, dubious offset programs, or unproven carbon capture technologies designed to prolong the life of the fossil fuel industry. Representative Pallone, who takes money from the fossil fuel industry needs to get off it. He needs to get off this committee. He needs to get out of the Congress, or he needs to stop taking money from the fossil fuel industry and realize the fossil fuel industry is the enemy of the people. Not the only enemy of the people, but as sure as we are talking here, one of the most grievous enemies of the people of the United States and the people of the world. The committee's release of the legislative text came just a day after Friends of the Earth by U.S. and the Partnership for Policy Integrity published an analysis detailing the dirty secrets of the proposal based on the information about the plan that had been publicized up until this point. As Common Dreams reported on Monday, the analysis called the Clean Future Act extremely disappointing and a failure of climate leadership, and even suggested it should be called the Dirty Future Act. Friends of the Earth doubled down on its criticism of the measure in a statement Tuesday. Lucas Ross, a senior policy analyst with the group, said that, quote, Chairman Pallone needs to do far more to protect communities and the climate, unquote. And I'd suggest that Chairman Pallone is the wrong person to do this and should immediately be replaced as chairperson of this committee with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez without any delay. Quote, the proposed starting point for his clean electricity standard is startlingly high. Fossil fuels must be kept in the ground, not kept in business. Emissions trading schemes and other market gimmicks are unjust and ineffective, said by Lucas Ross. Frank Pallone is posing as an environmentalist while trying to keep the door open for fracked gas. This is the opposite of leadership on the climate. And there's a tweet from Friends of the Earth saying, with a meme saying, don't let Frank frack up clean energy. And they refer to him now as Frack Pallone. Chairman Frack Pallone. Heretofore to always be known as Frack Pallone. There were some organizations that were more welcoming of the proposal. This bill has the ability to serve as a strong step forward in focusing the national conversation toward getting real solutions on the ground and cutting carbon emissions as quickly as possible, which is a diplomatic way of saying it'll focus our conversation, has already focused our conversation because it's completely inadequate. And we know it's a POS. So we know that we need real solutions on the ground that cut carbon emissions as quickly as possible, which this bill does not. That's how I read that very diplomatic statement from the director of Environment America's Global Warming Solutions Campaign. Rob Cowan, Director of Government Affairs for the Climate Energy Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, echoed that sentiment and highlighted some of the bill's accomplishments. Quote, climate change is already affecting people around the country, and the science shows we need to make swift, deep cuts in heat-trapping emissions across the economy to help to limit its harmful impacts. Then he says, quote, while not comprehensive, the Clean Future Act is a thoughtful start to developing climate to developing the kind of legislation that addresses the scale and scope of the problem, unquote. And Cohen applauded the bill's, quote, strong focus on environmental justice, workforce development, but okay, and attempted to modernize, okay, our electric grid and reducing emissions from the transportation sector. And Cohen expressed support for policies to increase vehicle electrification and reduce heat trapping emissions from all cars and trucks. And then he goes on with another diplomatic, I quote, he says it includes a national clean energy standard that could be transformational if designed well. He also said that a national clean energy standard must not increase our reliance on natural gas generation, as natural gas use economy wide now contributes more to U.S. carbon emissions than coal. And then he said, rather diplomatically, we'll continue to work towards enacting bills consistent with the science, and that will provide a just and equitable transition to a clean energy economy, which is a diplomatic way of saying this bill doesn't do it. We've got to continue to work towards enacting legislation that actually does do it. So we need to get rid of the people on this committee who are supporting this bill. They are betraying us. They are taking steps to condemn us to death. We need to get a new group of people on this House committee in order to develop something that we can call the Green New Deal in the form of something that can be legislated by the House. I suggest that a good first step would be to mark up the Bernie Sanders bill that he introduced into the Senate and improve on that, because that was a Green New Deal bill. We have to facilitate that. And the way we can facilitate that is by getting rid of Nancy Pelosi this fall, supporting Shahid Buttar, who is running against her in the primary in California. We need to ensure that Shahid actually beats her in that primary so that she retires. She goes home to enjoy her grandchildren and leaves the job of saving their lives to us, since she is doing nothing to facilitate that particular happening. She's been betraying them for years, and she continues to do so. She's the one who makes the committee appointments, and she's the one who created the monstrous group of Democrats on this committee who refuse to do what is necessary to meet the climate emergency. So that's what I wanted to say today. And I'll get to your comments in just a second. But please share, like, and subscribe when the YouTube version goes up, roughly 20 minutes after we end here. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Now I will join you and go over your comments, which you know that I always enjoy doing. Okay, I am there now. Please share, share, share this. Thank you. Dale Weaver says, thanks for sharing this, Steve. Hang on a second. I want to get a better look at my monitor here. So I'll go past the greetings and the initial comments. I covered them before anyway. My links. And Kay points out that Steve used to be a T reporter. And yes, no, Mickey Const was a TYT reporter. Steve says, oh, okay, Jordan also has a good show, Status Quo. Yes, he does. Hardline News Media or Hard Lens Media, Kay? And the Canadian guy, the Rational National, Dave Doel, he's excellent as well. Dale Weaver says, you're fine, Doc. Thank you, Dale. And Russ Goldman has joined. Hey, Russ. Evelina says, yes. Russ says, just got here. Evening, Dr. Joe. And Steve says, the Corbett report is the gold standard, okay, in my opinion. Yeah, I think it's really pretty good, too. But I like Jake Johnson as well. Quite a lot. Quite a lot. Kay says, I'll have to look for that one, Joe. And Steve Wolfbrand says, he's an American expat who's living in Japan. Sorry, who is an American expat who's living in Japan? Kay says, that's interesting. My daughter Devore has joined. Hi, honey. And Kay says, Bernie's backers are in Iowa City live right now working for him. He does inspire all kinds of people. I'll bet they're doing a great job. Steve says, Biden is losing his cool, touching and pushing people, anger issues. He's losing it. Well, people have been saying that for months. He's hung in there a lot longer than people thought. It's simply the mainstream that continues to prop him up. And the fact that I don't know how many people have been paying attention to the primaries, Kay, and all the debates until now. Kay says, yes, I've seen those videos too of Biden. He keeps telling people to vote for someone else. Makes me wonder if he really does not want to win, Steve. And Kay says, Steve, I don't think he is well physically, Biden, that is. Well, maybe he isn't. He is, after all, almost the same age as Bernie. He is 77. On the other hand, he's 4 years younger than I am. But I don't know how I'd be if I had the kind of traveling these people have to do. Now, Joe Biden has had less traveling because his campaign is trying to keep him out of personal appearances because they're afraid of the gaffes. I don't know if I could keep the schedule Bernie Sanders keeps. I'm pretty strong-willed about certain things, but I would not relish a schedule like that. Kate, 81. Kay says, yes, I've seen those videos too of Biden. He keeps telling people to vote for someone else. I said that already. Kay says, yep, both probably, Steve. Kay says, flashback from Reagan. Yeah. Steve says, paradise is gone. And Kay says, laugh out loud. The paradise has been gone in GOP ruled Ohio for most of life. For most of my life, it's worse now though. There's a Chinese saying, "May you live in interesting times." We've gone miles beyond that. Yes, it's been far too interesting, I'm afraid. And Kay says, ain't that the truth, Steve? Kay says, my grandson works in the fracking business. I worry so much about him, but he bought to the program and doesn't understand how dangerous it is the way they frack now. Steve says, I only have a few decades left on this rock. I'm not in this for myself. Kay says, exactly. I'm 66, so I understand that. Steve Gonzo's joined. Kay says, it's hard when the family is so uneducated and they hate me for my knowledge on the climate issue. They probably hate you for a lot of other knowledge you have too, Kay. Steve says, by leave it in the ground, we have better solutions now. Exactly. Kay says, we've had those for decades, but follow the money. Kay says, Ohio is ground zero for all the pollution too. Jobs are no longer easy to find, so I kind of understand his feelings, but I still worry a lot. Russ says, I got an unfortunate super early appointment tomorrow, so I'm shutting off the computer for the night. See you again soon. Thank you, Russ. And Kay, there's a new comment there. Kay says, night, Russell. Kay says, probably just what you said, Joe. Laugh out loud. I get them confused. I watch so many of them. Yeah, me too, Kay. I watch a lot of the alternative news. And the reason why I do is because the mainstream does such a terrible job. Just such a terrible job. Okay, any last comments? Any last comments before the bar closes for the night? It's last call. I'll be back tomorrow in the 9 o'clock hour. Not quite sure what I'm going to talk about yet, but there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about, so that is never a problem. Things are happening quick and fast now. I think we're about to see the climax of this because the mainstream is really starting to mobilize to block the burn. My personal hunch is that they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to do it. But in the process, the result may be a split of the Democratic Party, and the conventional Democratic Party may end. Kay says, night, Joe. I'll have my beer while you have your wine. Laugh out loud. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, Kay. Thank you for being here. Any other comments? Kay says, if they do, they will lose. More than lose the election, which they probably don't mind because they dislike Bernie even more than they dislike Trump. What they probably like to do now is to impeach Trump so they get rid of him. Okay, and then they probably figure they can run anybody against Pence. And even if they don't win, it's all right because they probably figure Pence is not as dangerous to them as Trump. So if they do impeach Trump, They may be ready to put through a plan in which they risk losing as long as they keep the House of Representatives and as long as they feel they're no longer in danger from Trump. That may be the way they calculate this. I don't know. We'll have to see. Anyway, that's all for tonight. I don't see any other comments, so good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.